scary stories.
Every night, I share a story that most people wouldn't dare to tell. If you're listening, you're already one of us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, that's okay. But just know, every new subscriber brings me one step closer to building a safe place for the one person I love most, my mother. So if you enjoy these haunted tales, press that button, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be the reason the next story finds a happier ending. I didn't believe in ghosts. Not until the day I moved my family into the house on Elder Root Road, a name that, in hindsight, should have told me everything. The farmhouse had been abandoned for years. My great-uncle, Jeremiah Hale, willed it to me in a letter that arrived with dust on the envelope and ink that bled like dried blood. The letter said, "This house knows your name, Lucas. You were meant to finish what I couldn't." At the time, I thought he meant my writing. Emily, my wife, had her doubts. "It looks like it's been rotting since the Dust Bowl," she whispered as we pulled into the gravel driveway. Tall grass brushing the car doors, the rusted gate leaning forward like it was bowing. But for me, it was perfect. Quiet. No distractions. Just fields, endless rows of dead potatoes, and time. Time to write again. Time to be someone. Time to be whole. I hadn't published a book in 7 years. Our daughter, Mira, was 10. She thought the house was weird cool. She said the wind sounded like someone breathing. I told her that was just the wind through the gutters. But she was right. The first night, we slept on inflatable mattresses in the living room. The whole house had a smell. Not mildew, not rot exactly. But something earthy, like soil that had been fed something warm. There were claw marks behind the wallpaper in the hallway. Long, wide marks, like someone had tried to dig out. Rats. I told Emily. She didn't believe me. Rats don't claw up to 6 feet off the floor. The basement was locked. Padlocked. The key wasn't in the house. I should have taken that as a sign. Instead, I told myself it was probably mold down there. I didn't need distractions. I needed inspiration. And this house, with its creaking floorboards and decades of silence, felt like the kind of place where something would finally happen. I was right. Something did. I found it under a loose floorboard in the upstairs bedroom. A leather journal, brittle with age. The name inside was Jeremiah Hale, my great-uncle. The first entry was dated August 3rd, 1962. The land grows still. Even the crows. Don't fly over it. I buried the bones beneath the third row, like she said. But it's not enough. She still whispers. She still watches. I thought it was a draft. Maybe an old horror novel idea he'd never finished. But the writing grew stranger, less poetic, more desperate. Scrawled ink, tear stains, pages torn out. I heard Mira's voice again last night, but she's been dead 40 years. Mira, our daughter's name. What were the odds? Emily laughed it off. "Old people write weird things," she said. But that night, Mira woke me up at 3:13 a.m. "There's someone outside my window," she whispered. The potato field stretched black and endless behind her. "There's a lady standing out there. She has no eyes." I didn't sleep. I stared into that field until morning. There was no woman, no footprints, nothing but dry dirt and the bent stalks of rotting potatoes. But the next night, I heard it too. It was a whisper. Faint. Faint but close, like breath on glass. I followed it to the hallway, the one with the claw marks, and felt a gust of cold behind the wall. There was something hollow behind it. A space. I didn't tell Emily. Not yet. I needed to write, and write I did. The next morning, I woke up to find 10 pages typed on my laptop. I didn't remember writing them, but they were good. Better than anything I'd written in years. The story? A family moving to a house in a field, where the daughter sees a woman with no eyes. Mira started drawing things. Not cartoons. Not animals. She drew roots. Endless black roots crawling across the floor, across our walls, into our mouths and eyes. Emily was quiet now. She spent hours staring into the field. Sometimes I caught her muttering, hands caked in soil. I found her one morning in the bathtub, whispering, "She grows in us," over and over again. She didn't remember saying it. The walls began to creak with a rhythm, like breathing. The pipes groaned like something was alive in them. I found potato vines growing under our bed, in our closets, through the walls. Emily swore she never planted them. Mira said, "The lady told me it's almost time." Walter, my father, drove in without warning. The minute he stepped onto the porch, he went pale. "This is her house," he said. "Whose?" "She was here before the field, before us." He refused to stay. Said Jeremiah was the last one who tried to leave and lived. Didn't understand. That night I dreamed of a face. Skin peeled back, hollow sockets weeping black soil. A mouth sewn shut but still whispering. "She grows in you, Lucas." I woke up to find soil in my mouth. Emily was gone. So was Mira. I found them standing in the potato field, holding hands, eyes closed, whispering in unison. "She grows in us. She grows in us." And beneath their feet, I could see the soil moving. Something was coming to the surface. I woke up on the porch. The sun was too bright, too still, like someone had paused time and then restarted it incorrectly. My mouth was dry. My clothes were damp with sweat and soil. There were black fingerprints around my neck, like someone had held me in my sleep. Mira and Emily were inside, sitting at the table in silence. They didn't look up. They didn't blink. Emily whispered something under her breath repeatedly. I leaned in. "She grows in us. She grows in us. She grows in us." I slapped the table. "Stop it!" She looked up, startled. "What?" She didn't remember a thing. Mira just kept staring at me, eyes wide. "Daddy, you were in the dirt." The journal was gone. Jeremiah's old leather-bound record of his descent, gone from beneath the floorboards where I had hidden it. I tore up the room. Nothing. But that night, I heard him. A voice. My great-uncle's voice, whispering from the vents. "Don't let her plant you, Lucas." The mirrors in the hallway had fogged from the inside. My reflection didn't match me. I touched the glass. It felt warm. Alive. Behind me, in the reflection, there was someone. A woman. Pale. Mouth sewn shut. Black fluid dripping from her eyes like tears. I spun. Nothing. But the whisper came again. "She grows in the guilt." I broke into the basement. With a hammer and 2 hours of hesitation, the padlock snapped. The door creaked open, revealing narrow stairs that descended into the earth itself. The walls were made of potato roots. I mean that literally. Dark, fibrous roots pressed against the wood and stone, twitching when the light hit them. The air was humid, rotten. I couldn't breathe. At the base of the stairs, I found the nursery. A room full of tiny rocking chairs, all facing a wall of dolls, faceless, made of dried potato skins and stitched hair. On the floor, a name etched in hundreds of scratches. Mira, 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 and on the wall, a phrase in blood. "The seed came from you." Emily stopped sleeping. She just stood at the window all night, looking into the field. Her nails turned black. Her teeth too. Mira wouldn't come near her. "She's not Mommy anymore," she whispered. When I tried to confront Emily, she smiled with her lips shut tight. "You don't remember the accident, do you?" she asked. "What accident?" She turned back to the window. "You buried her already once, and she came back. That's the problem with the field. Nothing stays buried here." I called my father again. He told me to leave. "Jeremiah used to say the land was cursed," he whispered. "He said it wasn't just the soil. It was what the Hale family brought into it. Secrets, guilt, blood." I asked him what happened to Mira. The other Mira. There was silence. Then he said, "You don't remember because your mind broke when you dug that grave." I dropped the phone. The world tilted. I remembered hands, dirt, screaming, Emily crying, a little girl's arm hanging limp, a shovel. I remembered the sound the soil made when it closed over her. But Mira was alive, wasn't she? I woke up to screaming. It came from the potato field. I ran out, barefoot, heart in my throat. I found Mira in the center of the field, in a perfect circle. The vines pulled back like the ground itself had swallowed them. Beneath her, a black pit was open. Roots moved like fingers. And the woman, the eyeless woman, stood behind her. Whispers filled the air like static. I dove toward Mira. The moment I touched her, the world flashed white. I saw myself, holding a dead girl, digging. Then, blackness. I woke up on the floor of the nursery, covered in dirt. Emily stood over me. "She wants to show you the truth. You won't understand until you see what really happened." She lifted her hand. In her palm was a tiny sprouting root, pulsing like a heart. She planted it inside you. The nights blended into each other. I stopped sleeping. Not because I didn't want to, but because every time I closed my eyes, I was there again. Digging, crying, burying someone small. Mira? No. It was another child. But she looked like Mira. Emily didn't seem to sleep either. But she changed in other ways. She began walking barefoot through the field in the moonlight. Eyes rolled back, hands outstretched. The dirt moved for her, parting under her feet like it welcomed her. I once tried to follow her. She turned back and said, "Not yet, Lucas. You're not ripe." While searching through the attic, I found it. Another journal. Not Jeremiah's, but Emily's. The entries began normal enough. Notes about our trip, ideas for novels. Then, the whispers won't stop. "There's a woman in the walls. She wants to teach me how to become." Lucas is forgetting again. The field wants him confused. I buried the teeth beneath the old scarecrow. I had to. It was part of the deal. A chill ran through me. I tore through the field until I found the scarecrow. I dug under it, shaking, gagging, and there, in a rusted tin box, were a child's teeth, filed to points. Mira's pictures changed. She no longer drew trees or rabbits or us holding hands. She drew roots. Roots going through people's eyes, mouths, skin. She drew the field, with people, beneath it. Dozens, maybe hundreds. Arms reaching up, their mouths open in eternal screams. One picture showed a woman standing above them. No face. Just a black hole where her head should be. Under it, Mira had written in shaky letters, "The Harvester." There was an old stone well behind the house. We thought it was dry, thought it was sealed, until the night Mira screamed. We found her sitting at the edge of the well, muttering, "She's coming. She's almost done cooking." Inside the well, we heard a heartbeat. It echoed up the stones. Slow. Heavy, wet. Then something spoke, in a voice that sounded exactly like mine. Lucas, you promised her, remember? That night the sky turned red. I'm not being poetic. The moon rose full, but it was crimson. Thick clouds hung low. The air buzzed with flies. Emily said, "She's ready." She laid out old clothes on the porch, a child's dress. She has to wear something proper when she returns. I said, "Mira's right here." Emily looked at me, not confused, not afraid, sad. "That's not our daughter. That's the thing that crawled into her bones when you opened the gate." I turned to Mira. She was standing completely still, smiling too wide. Driven by desperation, I returned to the basement. I smashed the floor, pulled up the planks. There was more. A tunnel of dirt, winding down beneath the house, lit by roots that glowed faintly red. The air was heavy with rot. I crawled, for hours, maybe days, and at the end, I found a room. A circular chamber. Bones lined the walls, children's bones, marked with carvings. In the center, a pulsing sack of roots. Breathing. A voice echoed. "This is where stories come from. This is the soil of memory, of guilt, of sacrifice." I screamed. I ran, but I had already become part of it. My fingernails were gone, replaced by sprouting buds. My veins itched with movement. I returned to the house. Emily was gone. Mira stood in the center of the kitchen, eyes black, hair flowing upward like water. "I'm not Mira," she said in a voice that was many voices at once. "I'm what you left behind. I'm the guilt you buried. I'm the one who rots and grows." She reached out. My skin cracked. From my mouth, dirt poured. The harvest had begun. Days passed, or weeks. I wasn't sure anymore. Time had become a loop, a dream within a dream soaked in dirt and blood. I kept calling myself Lucas, but the name felt foreign, like wearing someone else's skin. Emily was still gone. Mira, if that was Mira, no longer needed food. She just stared out the window all day, whispering to the fields. Sometimes I woke up with dirt under my nails, and under my skin. Literal clumps pushing up from beneath, roots crawling inside, my veins like parasites. I was becoming something else. I found an old cassette player buried in a drawer. The tape inside was labeled, "Do not play." Naturally, I did. A voice, not mine, not Emily's, whispered, "You broke the pact. You planted without sacrifice. The harvest must balance. You owe her a body." Then I heard crying, then chewing. I boarded up every window in the house, every one, except one. The small attic window with the warped glass. No matter what I nailed over it, it would always be uncovered the next morning, through that window. She watched, the woman with no face. I didn't see her move. I didn't catch her watching, but I felt her. She wasn't outside the house anymore. She was in the walls. Sometimes I heard her crawl. I found Emily on the porch one morning, soaked, pale, her lips blue. She looked at me and said, "I went too deep. I saw what feeds it." Her voice cracked. "They plant people. Lucas, they plant pain. Every root, every crop. It's grown from suffering." I reached to touch her hand. It cracked, like dry earth. When I pulled back, her fingers crumbled into black dirt and bone slivers. That night, she was gone again. I heard them beneath the floorboards, beneath the soil, crawling, chanting. I dug a new tunnel, not the one I'd escaped from before. A fresh one, under the bedroom. I expected more bones. Instead, I found an underground room, lit with hundreds of candles made of waxy skin. Children sat in circles, whispering in languages I didn't know. Mira stood at the center, but she wasn't a child anymore. Her eyes were ancient, Her skin thin as parchment, her mouth full of teeth she hadn't been born with. She looked at me and said, "Welcome home, Father." Back upstairs, I reread Jeremiah's journal, then Emily's. Then I found a third journal, no name, just titled, "The First Seed." It spoke of the origin crop, an ancient rite. Each generation must offer 3 things to the field: a child's innocence, a mother's grief, a father's guilt. Only then could the soil birth the fruit of memory, a monstrous harvest that kept the land alive and trapped all who came near. I had given it all 3, without even knowing it. That night, I caught my reflection doing something I wasn't. It smiled before I did, blinked after me, then it said, "You're not the writer anymore, Lucas. You're just a page. She's writing you now." I smashed the mirror, but I still saw eyes in every reflective surface. Water, glass, metal, eyes watching me, judging me, hungry. It started in the hallway, a small root poking from the floorboard. Then it split the floor open, and the next day, a tree had burst through the hallway. An impossibly tall, crooked thing made of human limbs wrapped in bark. From its branches hung objects: a pacifier, a wedding ring, a bloody shirt. My memories. Mira stood beneath it, arms outstretched, whispering a lullaby backward. I can feel it now. The pull, the dirt in my lungs, my thoughts slow, like sap. The field doesn't just feed on bodies, it feeds on stories. My story, Emily's, Mira's, Jeremiah's. We're chapters in its eternal harvest, rewritten, erased, replanted. And now it wants a climax, a final sacrifice. I woke up outside, not in the house, not in the cellar, in the field. My fingers were caked with dirt. My mouth, sour with rot. Next to me was a body, wrapped in a burlap sheet, half buried. It was me. The same scar on the wrist, the same molar I cracked last year during a panic attack. Had I been replaced, or was this just another part of the field's ritual? The journal's words echoed in my head. The seed must die before it grows again. That evening, Mira made dinner. Real food, warm, spiced, perfect. She served it with a smile and said, "We have guests tonight." I asked who. She pointed to the chairs, and then they appeared. Emily, our unborn child, Jeremiah, my father, even the faceless woman. All of them sat and stared. Nobody ate except me. I was starving. With each bite, I felt more wrong, more full of them, like I was eating my memories, digesting the last pieces of who I used to be. At the end of dinner, Mira whispered, "Now you're ready to remember." I found a well behind the house that hadn't been there before, deep, ancient, breathing. Every few seconds, a low exhale came from within. I lowered the old rope and descended. Inside, I found a library, books made of bark and bone, each one titled with a person's name. Real names. I found mine, Lucas Hale. Inside, page after page of everything I had ever done, even the thoughts I'd never said out loud. On the final page, a handwritten line appeared before my eyes. "Now dig deeper." I did, and I saw the root of everything. He didn't go insane. He knew exactly what he was doing. Jeremiah Hale came to the field to feed it. Each book, each horror story. They weren't fiction, they were rituals. He trapped real people in the house and wrote their endings. And the land rewarded him. But when Emily came here and tried to write again, to start something new, It broke the rules. The field demanded sacrifice. That's why it came for her. That's why I'm next. I found a letter scrawled on the walls of the attic, written in blood and nails. Lucas, I knew the stories were real. I thought I could outsmart the house. I thought love would save us. But this place doesn't believe in love. It believes in pain. If you're reading this, then I've already become part of the story. I'm sorry. Save Mira. Burn it all. Even me. It grew overnight. In the center of the living room, its bark was made of mirrors, each one showing a different version of me. One crying, one smiling with black eyes, one hanging from a noose. I tried to cut it down. It screamed, in my voice. Buried beneath the house, hidden behind a door of bone, I found it. An upside-down church, stained glass windows made of skin, candles floating without flames. In the center, a pulpit with 3 objects, a rusted typewriter, a noose, a seed. Mira appeared behind me. She said, "It's time to choose your ending, Daddy. The field will write the rest." Each object whispered to me. The typewriter promised immortality. If I wrote the truth, let the field keep feeding. The noose promised escape, a final breath, and freedom from the cycle. The seed promised rebirth, to start again. But not as myself. I didn't choose. I closed my eyes and ran. I reached the car. Turned the key. It started. I drove. And drove. And drove. The trees never changed. The same mailbox passed again and again. The same crow sat on the fence each time. The field had no end. The road was a circle, the house, everywhere. I stopped the car and screamed. Behind me, Mira appeared in the back seat. "Where are you going, Daddy?" she said, smiling. The story isn't done yet. I stopped dreaming. I only remember standing at windows I've never seen, holding hands with people I've never met, watching fires that never burned. When I sleep, I hear the walls breathing, inside me. I no longer know where I end and the house begins. Mira no longer speaks like a child. She speaks like the field, like something older than time. She tells me I'm the last chapter, that my death will be beautiful, that the house is finally complete. I return to the attic and see a mirror I swear wasn't there before. It doesn't reflect me. It reflects another. Lucas, clean-shaven, younger, eyes filled with hope. He whispers, "You let it happen. You were always going to." And then he climbs out of the mirror. He tries to take my place. He wears my skin like a coat. I fight back. I stab the reflection with a shard of broken glass. But when it dies, I feel my stomach bleed. I lie on the floor, bleeding, staring up at a ceiling that grows roots. A knock on the door. Mira brings me a leather-bound book with my name burned into the cover. "Time to write the ending, Daddy," she says. The pages are blank, except for the first sentence. Lucas Hale did not survive the story. Every time I try to write something else, the words rearrange themselves. The field wants its ending. So I close the book. I toss it into the fireplace. The house screams. Blood drips from the ceiling, and the walls begin to peel like skin. She comes to me at night, not as a ghost, but as a memory trapped in flesh. Half of her face is burned. Half is still my wife. She says she forgives me. She says the only way to stop the cycle is to end the family. If they can't write, they can't feed the house, she whispers. She hands me a lighter and a single bullet. A choice. I finally break through the last sealed room. It smells like burnt sugar and grave soil. Inside are dozens of child-sized coffins, each labeled with initials, each filled with dolls made from human hair and bark. I find one with the initials MH, Mira Hale. But Mira is still alive, isn't she? The doll opens its eyes. It smiles and says, "Story's almost over. Everything moves now." The cabinets open on their own. Doors slam. The piano plays by itself, and then it stops pretending. The walls crawl like veins. The floor opens like a mouth. I fall into the field beneath the house, into the heart of it. The sky is red, the trees hang upside down, and there, beneath the roots, is the real house, made entirely of bones and mirrors. Inside, everyone I've ever known is waiting, smiling. A figure waits for me in the root throne, Jeremiah Hale, alive, eternal. His skin is bark. His eyes are crows. His voice is thunder. "You brought the final harvest," he says. "You finished what I began." I scream. I run. But the house is now me. There's no leaving yourself. I wake up in front of the fireplace. The book is back. Now it's complete. The last sentence reads, "He wrote his final word and the house finally slept." I look down. The typewriter is clicking on its own. My hands are writing even though I'm not moving them. I'm smiling, even as the blood pours from my nose. The letter arrived just as the storm began. I hadn't expected it. Not after all these years. My name scrawled in thick, uneven ink on an old-fashioned envelope sealed with wax. The moment I held it in my hands, I felt something shift in the air around me. A strange tingle, like the whisper of the dead against my skin. The letter was from none other than Dorian Thorne, my idol. The man who had haunted my nightmares with his stories. The man who had made horror feel real, raw, and unrelenting. And now he was asking me to come to his estate. The invitation felt too unreal to process. It was a dream I didn't dare wake up from. I had been a writer since I was 14. Horror was my world, my escape, my passion. But Dorian Thorne, he was a god in my mind, a legend. And yet, the letter spoke plainly, almost casually, as though we were already old acquaintances. "Dear Eleanor, your work has intrigued me. The way you capture the raw terror of the human psyche in such an elegant, restrained manner. I'd like you to come to my estate and assist me on a project. There's much to be done, and I believe your unique voice will be a valuable asset. Thorndale Estate awaits you. Come as soon as possible." The storm raged on as I boarded the train. Every mile seemed to stretch further into the unknown, as if the landscape itself were being swallowed up by some dark force. The journey felt endless, but the promise of working with Dorian pushed me forward. When I arrived, the train station was deserted. Not a soul in sight. Just the distant moan of wind through the trees. A solitary carriage awaited me. Its horse, a dull gray, its eyes as blank as the sky. The driver was a man with no name, no face that I could remember, but his eyes were too sharp, too knowing. As we drove deeper into the moors, I felt an unsettling pull, as though the land was drawing us in, wrapping around us like an ancient curse. Thorndale Estate was waiting. The mansion loomed ahead as the carriage creaked to a stop. It wasn't grand in the way I'd imagined. There was no bright, welcoming light from its windows, no sounds of life coming from within. Instead, it felt forgotten. Forgotten by time. Forgotten by the world. The air was thick with dampness, the smell of decay mixing with the pungent scent of wet earth. As I stepped down from the carriage, I felt an odd tightness in my chest. The house seemed to be breathing, its walls shuddering ever so slightly, as if it had a life of its own. I didn't know why, but in that moment, a whisper curled at the back of my mind, urging me to turn back. but I didn't. I couldn't. I was here, and Dorian Thorne was waiting. Inside, the mansion was nothing like I had imagined. The hallways were narrow, suffocatingly so, as though the walls were closing in with every step I took. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, and the scent of old books mixed with something far darker, something that felt alive. I was led through a maze of rooms until we reached the library. The doors groaned open, revealing rows and rows of bookshelves, each stacked high with leather-bound volumes. The dim light from the chandelier cast long shadows across the room, and I could hear the faintest of whispers, almost like voices trapped within the walls. Dorian Thorne was standing in front of a massive fireplace, his back to me, staring into the dying embers. His presence was imposing, but there was something almost familiar about him, as though I had known him for far longer than I realized. "Eleanor." His voice came low, thick with an unsettling calm. "I'm glad you could join me. There is much to be done." He turned to face me, his eyes sharp and calculating. There was a hunger in them, an intensity that made my heart race. Dorian was older than I expected, but time had done little to dull his aura. He had the air of a man who had seen things, who had experienced things that no one should. "You must be tired after your journey," he said, his voice warm but detached, as if he were merely stating a fact. "Come, I'll show you to your room." The bedroom was cold, too cold for such a large house. The bed was massive, draped in black velvet curtains that seemed to absorb all the light in the room. The windows were covered, the thick drapes blocking any view of the outside world. It was as though the mansion itself was trying to isolate me, to keep me within its walls. I tried to shake off the unsettling feeling, telling myself it was all just nerves. After all, I was here to work with Dorian Thorne. It was a dream come true, but the house wasn't a dream. It was a living, breathing thing, and it watched me. The next morning, I met Vera Thorne. She was everything Dorian wasn't. Quiet, withdrawn, her eyes dark and haunted. She didn't speak much, but there was a palpable sense of fear around her, a fear I couldn't quite place. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered one evening, her voice trembling. "None of us should. Dorian, he's not the man you think he is. The house, it changes people." I didn't understand what she meant at the time, but the unease in her voice sent a shiver down my spine. I dismissed it as paranoia, but deep inside, I couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that was growing in my chest. As days passed, I fell into a rhythm, assisting Dorian with his work, transcribing his notes, organizing his chaotic library of unpublished manuscripts. He seemed consumed by something dark and terrible. His writing was unlike anything I had ever encountered. Violent, twisted, and disturbingly real. One evening, I found a notebook tucked into the back of one of his bookshelves. The pages were covered in a spidery scrawl, and as I flipped through them, I realized they were my own words, my thoughts, my dreams. I slammed the notebook shut, heart pounding. There was no way he could know these things about me. It had to be a coincidence, I told myself. But when I glanced over my shoulder, the room felt different, the shadows longer, the air heavier. Something was watching me, and I was certain it was Dorian. But not the man I had come here to work with. Something else, something far darker. As the days dragged on, I felt more and more isolated. The house seemed to consume everything. My thoughts, my emotions, my sense of reality. The boundaries between Dorian's fiction and my own life began to blur, until I could no longer tell where his stories ended and my own began. And then, one night, I saw it. a mirror in the hallway. Not just any mirror, but one that seemed to reflect something else. A distorted version of myself, smiling, grinning, the eyes wide with madness. It was me, but it wasn't. It was someone, something else. And that's when I realized I was no longer just assisting Dorian Thorne with his work. I was becoming part of it. The days at Thorndale Estate seemed to stretch on endlessly, each one bleeding into the next as I sank further into the oppressive atmosphere of the house. At first, the work was exciting, but it quickly became suffocating. Dorian's presence, once a source of inspiration, now felt like a weight on my chest. He seemed to grow more distant, more otherworldly each time I saw him. His behavior had begun to change. His eyes, once full of warmth and encouragement, now held something darker, something predatory. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was a certain hunger in them that made my skin crawl. It was as though he were watching me more closely than before, as if waiting for me to slip up, to show some vulnerability. The mansion itself had become a maze, a place where rooms shifted and hallways stretched longer than they should. I could swear the layout changed every time I turned a corner. The walls felt alive, pressing in on me, whispering things I couldn't understand. Sometimes I could hear footsteps behind me, soft, almost imperceptible. But whenever I turned, there was no one there, only the oppressive silence that filled the house. Vera had become more elusive too. She had warned me the night we first met, but now she was rarely seen. Her footsteps echoed through the halls, but when I searched for her, I always found nothing, a ghost in her own home. The only time I saw her now was when she would appear briefly in the doorway of the library, her eyes wide with fear, before disappearing into the shadows. One night, I found her in the garden, standing by the wrought iron gate that led to the forest. The air was cold, the wind howling, but she didn't seem to notice. Her face was pale, and her eyes, those eyes were filled with a quiet desperation. "You have to leave," she whispered urgently. "Dorian, he's not who he says he is. This place, it's not what it seems. You're in danger." I wanted to ask her what she meant, to demand the truth, but the words stuck in my throat. I was too scared to speak. Instead, I stood there, watching her, as her figure faded into the mist, swallowed up by the night. But I didn't leave. I couldn't. It was as if something was pulling me deeper into this nightmare, like the house itself had become a part of me. Every time I tried to escape, to call for help, the walls seemed to close in tighter. My only choice was to keep working, to keep transcribing Dorian's words, even though they were becoming increasingly disturbing. I had begun to notice a pattern in his writing. It was as though he was documenting everything that was happening around me. The strange occurrences, the sensations of being watched, the growing fear that gnawed at the edges of my consciousness. The deeper I read into his manuscript, the more I began to see myself in the pages. He had written me into his work, but not as I was. No. He had twisted me into something unrecognizable, something horrific. It was as though he was trying to control me, to manipulate me into becoming the subject of his story. The lines between my real life and his fiction were blurring, merging into one grotesque reality. One evening, while I was alone in the library, a voice whispered my name. Low and drawn out, it echoed in my mind, sending a chill down my spine. Eleanor. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was no one there. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating. But then I saw it. On the wall, in the shadows, a shape began to take form. A figure. A dark silhouette that seemed to stretch and twist like smoke. It moved toward me, slowly, looked deliberately, until I could make out the outlines of a face. Dorian's face. But it wasn't his face. It was wrong. His eyes were empty, black as coal, and his smile stretched unnaturally wide. A grotesque, gaping grin that made my stomach churn. He reached out for me, his fingers curling toward my throat, and I couldn't move. My legs were frozen in place. My mind screamed at me to run, to escape, but my body betrayed me. "Do you see now, Eleanor?" the figure whispered, its voice distorted. "You are part of my story now. There's no escape." I stumbled back, finally breaking free from the paralysis. But when I looked again, the figure was gone. Only the shadows remained, flickering on the walls like fleeting memories. I ran out of the library, my heart racing, my breath shallow. I needed to find Vera. I needed answers. But when I found her, she was standing by the window, staring out into the fog. Her eyes were empty, hollow. "I warned you," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "But now it's too late. Dorian has already begun." I tried to confront Dorian that night. I had to. I had to know the truth. But when I entered his study, I found him sitting at his desk, his back to me. He didn't turn when I entered, didn't acknowledge me at all. Instead, he was writing. His pen moved across the paper in a furious, frenzied scrawl, faster and faster, as if he couldn't stop. "Dorian," I said, my voice trembling. "What's happening here? What are you doing to me?" He paused, but only for a moment. When he finally looked at me, his eyes were empty. The warmth had vanished, replaced by something cold and calculating. "You've become a part of it, Eleanor," he said, his voice low and emotionless. "You are the subject of the experiment now, and there is no turning back." I tried to flee. I tried to run, but the mansion wouldn't let me. The walls closed in, and the air grew thick with an oppressive weight, as if the house itself were trying to swallow me whole. As I stumbled through the halls, I found myself in the cellar. The heavy, musty air clung to my skin, and the only sound was the drip of water somewhere in the darkness. I turned a corner and froze. In the shadows stood a figure. A man, his face obscured by a mask, his hands covered in something dark. Blood? I backed away slowly, my breath catching in my throat. But then I heard a whisper, one I recognized, Dorian's voice. "You're not leaving, Eleanor," he said, his tone cold. "You're mine now." The figure moved closer, and I realized with horror that the mask was not just a mask. It was skin, a patchwork of flesh, sewn together like a grotesque costume. The figure's eyes gleamed from behind the mask, full of malice, full of hunger. I screamed, but it was too late. The nights at Thorndale Estate had grown longer, more suffocating. I couldn't sleep anymore, not with the constant feeling that something was watching me. Something sinister. The whispers in the walls were louder now, more distinct, as if they were speaking directly to me. My mind felt like it was on the verge of shattering, the thin thread of reality I was clinging to fraying with every passing day. I had tried to confront Dorian, but each time, he deflected my questions with unsettling calmness. His answers were like riddles, cryptic and elusive, leaving me more confused and terrified than before. Every time I thought I understood what was happening, he would twist the truth just enough to make me doubt my own senses. I could no longer trust anything in this house. Not the rooms, not the walls, not even my own thoughts. It wasn't just the mansion itself. The people in it were different now. Vera had disappeared completely, leaving only her absence behind. The other staff seemed to watch me from the corners of rooms, their eyes following my every movement. They never spoke, never acknowledged my presence, but I could feel them there, always there. And then there was the man in the cellar, the one with the patchwork mask. My mind couldn't make sense of it. I had to be imagining it, right? But the smell, the rot, the decay, it was real. The image of that mask haunted me. It wasn't a mask at all. It was a face, a grotesque collage of flesh stitched together with cruel precision. The next time I entered the cellar, I expected to see it again, but the room was empty. The walls, damp and cold, stared back at me, silent as ever. But the feeling of being watched lingered, thick and suffocating. Every step I took felt like it was echoing through the house, a warning that something was about to snap. I tried to leave again. I had to. The house was closing in on me, its walls pressing in tighter with every passing moment. I couldn't stand it anymore. But when I reached the front door, it wouldn't open. No matter how hard I pulled, the heavy wood remained shut, as if the house itself had decided I wasn't allowed to leave. Panic set in. I was trapped. That was when I heard it again. The voice. Soft at first, like a whisper on the wind. Eleanor. I spun around, but there was no one there. The hall was empty, just shadows. Eleanor, you can't leave. You belong here now. It was Dorian's voice. I knew it, deep in my bones. I was sure of it. But when I ran to find him, I couldn't find him anywhere. The halls were deserted, as though he had vanished into thin air. Days turned into weeks, but I couldn't escape. I tried to focus on my work, the manuscript he had given me, but the words on the pages no longer made sense. They twisted and writhed before my eyes, as though the text itself was alive, changing with every glance. The lines blurred, just like everything else in this house. The once beautiful prose had become something darker, more sinister. It felt like Dorian was writing me into his story, but not as a participant. No, I was the victim, the plaything. Had to confront him again. I couldn't keep running. I needed answers. I needed to know what was happening to me. What was happening to this place. That night, I found him in the study, staring out the window, his back to me. The house was silent, as though it too were holding its breath. Dorian, I said. My voice barely a whisper. What's going on? What is this place? What are you doing to me? He didn't turn around, but I could hear his voice. It was cold, distant, like a stranger's. You've been a part of this from the beginning, Eleanor, he said. You just didn't know it. This house, this experiment, it's all part of the story. And you, my dear, are the key, the one who will bring it all together. I didn't understand what he meant. But then, a cold realization settled over me. This wasn't just some twisted game. This was something much worse. Something I had walked into without even realizing it. You're not writing a story, I said, my voice trembling. This isn't a book. This is real. This is happening to me. Dorian finally turned to face me. His eyes were empty. There was nothing human in them, only darkness. And then he smiled. A slow, cruel smile that sent a shiver through my spine. Reality, Eleanor, he said, is just another story waiting to be told. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. This wasn't just a mansion. It wasn't just an experiment. Thorndale Estate was a stage. The walls, the rooms, the corridors, they were all part of the set. And I was the protagonist, but not by choice. I was the victim, the one being manipulated by Dorian's twisted, unrelenting vision. I was trapped in his story, and there was no way out. That night, as I wandered the house in a daze trying to process what had happened, I came across something horrifying. A series of photographs, old, faded, but unmistakable. They were pictures of me. My face, my body, posed in positions I had never been in, my eyes vacant and empty, as if I were already gone. The final photograph was the worst. It showed me standing in front of Thorndale Estate. But the background was wrong. The house was different, more twisted, more decayed. And in the photo, I was smiling. But it wasn't my smile. It was something else. Something unnatural. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't a psychological experiment anymore. This was a trap. And the more I stayed, the more I became a part of it. Thorndale Estate was consuming me, piece by piece. My memories, my thoughts, my very existence were being rewritten. The mansion wasn't just holding me prisoner, it was recreating me. I had to leave. I had to escape, or else I would become just another page in Dorian's sick manuscript, another character in his twisted world. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't escape. Every door, every window, every exit was locked. The house was a labyrinth with no way out. And then, just as I thought I might lose my mind entirely, I saw him. Dorian. He stood in the doorway, watching me with that same cold, calculating gaze. "You've become the story, Eleanor," he said, softly. "There's no escaping it now. You're part of me, part of my world." I wanted to scream, I wanted to fight, but all I could do was stare at him in horror. And as I looked into his empty eyes, I understood. There was no escape. This was my story now. And in this story, there would be no happy ending. The walls of Thorndale Estate had always felt oppressive, but now they seemed alive, pulsing with a heartbeat I could almost hear. The air was thick, suffocating. Each breath was a struggle, as if the house was slowly squeezing the life out of me. I no longer recognized the rooms, the hallways. They were shifting, changing shape with every turn, as though the very foundation of reality was unstable. The house was more than a structure. It was a living organism, feeding off of my fear. I was no longer sure what was real. There were moments when I would wake up and find myself in a different part of the house than I had been when I fell asleep. The halls stretched longer, the doors leading to unfamiliar rooms. One night I stumbled upon a library, a place I had never seen before. The shelves were filled with books, but when I opened them, the pages were blank. Not empty, but blank, as if they were waiting for a story to be written. And somehow I knew that story was mine. My fate had been scripted into this place, this nightmare. Dorian's presence had become a constant. He appeared without warning, his shadow falling over me at the most unexpected times. It was as if he were always watching, always waiting for the right moment to pull the strings. But there was something else, something darker, lurking beneath the surface of his calm demeanor. He wasn't just manipulating me, he was feeding off me. My fear, my confusion, my desperation. I was a vessel for his sick game, and I could feel it draining me, slowly, piece by piece. One evening, I found myself standing in front of a full-length mirror in the hallway. My reflection stared back at me, but it wasn't me. Not entirely. The eyes that looked back at me were hollow, sunken. My skin was pale, as if the life had been sucked out of me. My expression was twisted in a silent scream. I reached out to touch the glass, and as I did, my reflection moved. Before I did, it smiled. A dark, twisted grin that wasn't mine. That was the moment I realized it wasn't just Dorian who was manipulating me. The house, the experiment, it was changing me. I was no longer the person I had been when I arrived. Something had shifted inside me. Something dark. Something I couldn't escape. I tried to confront Dorian again, to demand answers. But this time, when I approached him, he wasn't alone. There were others, figures in the shadows, their faces obscured by masks. Their eyes glinted with a kind of malevolent amusement, as if they were watching a show unfold. "Dorian," I whispered, my voice trembling. "What is this? What do you want from me?" He turned to face me, his expression unreadable. "What I want, Eleanor, is already happening. The story is in motion, and you are its center. The only thing left is to finish it." "What do you mean, finish it?" I demanded, my voice rising in panic. Dorian took a slow step toward me, his presence overwhelming. "The experiment is over," he said softly. "You've played your part. The house has claimed you, as it claims all of us. And now you will become one of us." Fear flooded through me, a cold, paralyzing wave. I felt my knees buckle, but Dorian's hands were there to catch me, to steady me. His grip was iron, his touch cold, and for the first time, I realized that this wasn't just an experiment. This was an indoctrination. I was being absorbed into something far older, far more sinister than I had ever imagined. In the days that followed, I could no longer trust my own mind. I would wake up and find that the rooms I had been in the night before had changed completely. The walls had moved, the furniture had been rearranged, and sometimes, I would find objects I had never seen before, as though they had always been there. One night, I saw the portrait of a woman hanging in a room I had never entered. Her eyes were familiar, but I couldn't place her. And when I reached out to touch the frame, it felt as though the woman in the painting was staring at me, not through me. Her eyes followed my every move. The house was alive, and it was feeding on me. Each passing moment brought me closer to a breaking point, to a place where there would be no return. And Dorian, with his calm, cold demeanor, was the orchestrator of it all. He wasn't just a writer. He was something far more dangerous. He was a god in this place, and I was nothing more than a character in his story. A story I couldn't escape. But there were cracks in the illusion. I could feel them. They were small at first. Fragments of memories slipping through the fog of my mind. Faces, names, events that shouldn't have been here. Things that didn't belong. I could remember who I had been before Thorndale, before Dorian. I could remember the world outside. One night, as I wandered the house in a daze, I stumbled upon a room I had never seen before. It was hidden deep within the mansion, down a narrow staircase that I didn't even know existed. The room was dark, but the faint glow of a candle illuminated a desk, stacked high with papers. They were all written in Dorian's unmistakable handwriting. But this time, the words were different. They weren't part of the story he had been writing about me. They were my own words, my own thoughts. I began reading, my hands trembling, as I deciphered the words. The pages were filled with my own fears, my own darkest thoughts. It was as if Dorian had taken everything from my mind and laid it bare for me to see. And then I found it. My name, written in blood at the bottom of the page. "Eleanor Reed," I whispered, my voice shaking. "This is my story. This is me." I looked up, and for the first time, I understood what Dorian had been doing. He wasn't just writing about me. He was creating me. Every fear, every insecurity, every doubt had been twisted into this horrific reality. And now, the story was coming to its climax. The end was near, and there was no way out. I had to make a choice. I could either let the story consume me, let Dorian and the house win, or I could fight. I had to find a way to break the cycle, to destroy the story he had written before it consumed me entirely. But how could I escape a world that had been written for me? A world that was me? The house was no longer a structure of brick and mortar. It was a living, breathing entity, and it had claimed me. Each step I took within its walls felt like I was sinking deeper into the mire of my own mind. The air was thick with a sense of impending doom, a pressure I could feel in my chest, suffocating me. I was being slowly absorbed by the very place I had once believed to be my salvation. I had tried to fight it. I had tried to hold on to the fragments of my former self, to find any semblance of the person I had been before I entered Thorndale. But every time I thought I was close, the house shifted, the walls closing in tighter, the air growing heavier. I was trapped, a puppet in a story that had been written long before I had ever stepped foot here. Dorian was no longer the man I had once admired. He had become something darker, something far more sinister. He watched me with those cold, calculating eyes, like a predator circling its prey, waiting for the right moment to strike. I could feel the weight of his gaze on me, even when he wasn't in the room. It was as if he was always there, lurking in the shadows, manipulating the very fabric of reality to suit his twisted needs. It was in the dead of night when I made my decision. I had read the pages, his pages, where he had written about me, where he had laid out my fears, my doubts, my weaknesses. I saw myself through his eyes, a fragile, broken thing. But I couldn't allow myself to be defined by his words any longer. I couldn't let him control me. I fled. The corridors were endless, twisting and turning like a labyrinth that refused to end. Each door I opened led to another nightmare. Another fragment of my mind turned against me. I saw visions, flashes, of memories I couldn't place, faces I couldn't recognize. I was losing myself, slipping further into madness with every step. But I couldn't stop. I had to find a way out. I had to break the cycle. As I stumbled through the endless hallways, I heard a sound. A low, guttural growl that echoed from deep within the house. The walls trembled. The ground beneath my feet shook. I turned, and for the first time, I saw it. The heart of Thorndale, the source of its power. The walls were bleeding, cracks running through the stone, leaking dark, viscous blood. The house itself was alive, feeding off of me, feeding off of my fear. And in the center of it all, standing like a dark god, was Dorian. He was no longer just a man. He had become something monstrous, something otherworldly. His form flickered, his features distorting and shifting like a nightmare made flesh. His eyes burned with an unholy fire, and the shadows around him twisted, writhing like living things. He was the embodiment of the house, the twisted mind behind the nightmare I had been trapped in. "You can't escape, Eleanor," Dorian's voice echoed, a mocking tone lacing his words. "This is where you belong. You were never meant to leave. You are mine now." His words were like a curse, pulling me closer, chaining me to the ground. The house responded to his every command, the walls tightening, the air growing colder. I could feel the weight of his power pressing down on me, suffocating me. But I refused to give in. I couldn't. I closed my eyes, focusing on the memories I had left. The memories of who I had been before I came here. I thought of my writing, the stories I had written, the passion that had driven me. I thought of the person I wanted to be, the person I could be if I could just break free from this nightmare. And then I remembered the key. Earlier, in the hidden room, I had found a small silver key. Its edges worn, its surface smooth. I had no idea where it had come from. But now, in the depths of this madness, it felt like the answer. I knew what I had to do. I turned to face Dorian, my voice shaking but resolute. "You don't control me. Not anymore. For the first time, Dorian faltered. The air around him crackled with tension, and the shadows recoiled, as if they feared me. The house itself seemed to tremble in response to my defiance. With a final, desperate rush, I ran toward him, the silver key clutched tightly in my hand. I could hear the growl of the house behind me, its hunger growing, but I pushed forward. I had to reach him, had to break the connection between Dorian and the house. As I reached him, I thrust the key into the center of his chest, where his heart should have been. For a moment, nothing happened. The world seemed to pause, holding its breath. Then, the ground shook violently, and the house screamed, an unearthly, tortured sound that reverberated through my very bones. Dorian's form distorted, his body convulsing as if he were being torn apart from the inside out. The shadows around him writhed, pulling away from him, as if they were escaping his control. His eyes widened in shock, and for the first time, I saw fear in them. You can't," he gasped, his voice cracking. "This isn't over." But it was. The key glowed with a bright, blinding light, and Dorian's form shattered into a million pieces, his screams fading into the ether. The house let out one final, earth-shattering roar before collapsing in on itself, the walls crumbling, the blood-stained floors disintegrating into dust. And then, silence. I stood alone in the ruins of Thorndale Estate, the weight of the nightmare lifting from my shoulders. The house was gone, reduced to nothing but ashes. The air was clear, the suffocating pressure lifted. I could breathe again, but as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me. That somehow, in the deepest corners of my mind, the story was not yet finished. I woke up in the same room where it all began. The walls were no longer bleeding, the shadows no longer whispering. The air was crisp, fresh, free of the suffocating weight that had once clung to me. But something was wrong. I could feel it in the silence that had replaced the constant, oppressive hum of dread. It was too quiet, too still. The house was gone. The walls had collapsed. The blood-soaked floors had turned to dust. Thorndale Estate had crumbled to nothingness, vanishing as if it had never existed. But even in its absence, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been left behind. Something that was still very much alive. I stood up from the bed, my limbs heavy, like they were moving through water. It felt as though I was walking, in a dream, disconnected from reality. My hands were trembling as I touched the walls, the smooth surface of the wallpaper cool to the touch. There was no blood, no cracks, no signs of the horrors that had once pervaded this place. But the memories lingered, sharp and vivid. The fear, the darkness, Dorian's cold, unforgiving eyes, his voice echoing in my mind like a cursed chant. I had destroyed him, yes. But had I truly escaped? Or had I merely unleashed something darker, something worse than what had already been? I walked toward the door, hesitant, afraid that if I opened it, I would find myself back in the labyrinth of Thorndale, trapped in another nightmare. But there was no turning back now. I had to know the truth. I had to understand what had happened. The world outside was bathed in the pale light of the early morning. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows across the empty landscape. I stepped out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. The house was gone, but the forest surrounding it was still there, dark and ominous, as if it had always been watching me, waiting for me to return. I made my way to the forest's edge, my feet crunching against the dead leaves beneath me. There was a clearing up ahead, the same one I had walked to on my first night in Thorndale. The moon had been full then, casting an eerie glow over the land. But now, the moon had faded, replaced by the weak light of the morning sun. The clearing was empty, desolate. I breathed in deeply, the scent of fresh earth and pine filling my lungs. The air was clean, no longer tainted by the twisted power that had once poisoned it. I had destroyed Dorian. I had broken free from Thorndale. Or so I thought. But as I stood there, in the middle of the clearing, something stirred. A movement in the corner of my eye. A shadow, long and thin, shifting against the backdrop of the trees. I turned, my heart leaping into my throat. And there, standing in the shadows of the forest, was Dorian. His form was no longer human. It was a twisted, grotesque thing. A distortion of what he had once been. His features flickered and shifted, like a nightmare that refused to take shape. His eyes, however, were the same, cold, empty, and unrelenting. "You can't escape me." "Eleanor!" His voice came smooth and chilling, like silk dragged across broken glass. "You destroyed the house, but you can't destroy me. I am in you now, and you'll never be free." My body went cold. I stumbled back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. The clearing seemed to close in around me, the trees warping, the ground shifting beneath my feet. It was the same nightmare, over and over again, a cycle I could never break. But something within me had changed. I wasn't the same person I had been when I first arrived at Thorndale. The terror that had once consumed me was gone, replaced by something stronger, something more defiant. "No," I whispered, my voice trembling but determined. "You're not real. You're just another fragment of the nightmare you created, and I am done living in it." Dorian's form flickered again, his eyes narrowing with anger. The ground beneath us trembled, the air thickening with the weight of his rage. But I stood my ground. "You're nothing but a manifestation of my own fear, Dorian," I said, my voice growing stronger. "A part of the game you forced me to play. But the game is over. I won. And you're nothing." The world around us trembled as if the very fabric of reality was being torn apart. Dorian's form began to flicker, his shape distorting, as the forest around us seemed to come alive, growing darker, more oppressive. But I could feel it. The power he once held over me slipping away. He was fading, losing his grip on me. "No, Eleanor," he hissed, his voice barely a whisper. "You can't win. You can't escape me." But I was already walking away, my back turned to him. I could hear the sound of his voice growing fainter, fading into the distance. The shadows in the forest seemed to recede, the oppressive weight lifting from my chest. The sun had risen fully now, bathing the world in a warm, golden light. The nightmare was over. I walked out of the forest and into the world beyond. My heart still racing, my mind still reeling from everything that had happened. But I was free. I had escaped. And I would never look back. Years passed. The memories of Thorndale faded into the background, buried beneath the layers of my life. I had become a successful writer, a name that was known and respected in the literary world. But even as I sat at my desk, writing my latest novel, there was always a part of me that felt unsettled, haunted by the echoes of Thorndale, by the twisted words Dorian had written. I had destroyed him. I had broken free. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howls through the trees and the moon is full, I can't help but wonder, did I truly escape? The road stretched endlessly into the woods, a jagged scar of gravel winding through skeletal trees. As our car crept forward, I glanced at Grace. She had one leg up on the dash, chewing gum, scrolling through her phone as if we weren't about to disappear into the middle of nowhere. "This place better have power," she said, not looking up. I didn't answer. My mind was on the script, on the shots I needed. This was supposed to be my project, my vision, my redemption. The cabin appeared like a corpse buried under dirt and moss. Weather-worn wood, a sagging roof, one broken window patched with cardboard. It looked perfect. I killed the engine. "This is it," I said. Grace laughed. "It looks like where raccoons go to die." Exactly. Inside it smelled of rot and dust. The floor groaned under our boots. There was no TV, no reception, just a fireplace, a moth-eaten couch, a rusty kitchen sink. I unpacked the gear, my camera, lights, audio recorder. Grace watched me, unimpressed. "You really think you're gonna win some film award with this?" she asked. "No," I replied, adjusting the tripod. "But maybe someone will remember it." She rolled her eyes. Later that night, we found the first tape. Grace had been digging through a trunk in the attic. Old blankets, broken flashlights, spiderwebs thick enough to choke. "Check this out," she called. She held up a dusty VHS tape. Black, unmarked, except for a fading sticker. Passion Project 1. We didn't even have a TV. But Grace found a portable player in a drawer below the fireplace. Miraculously functional. I hesitated. Something about the tape felt wrong. She popped it in. It started with static, then shaky footage of the same cabin, our cabin, but older, more decayed. The camera moved through the hallway. A girl's voice whispered, "Is anyone there?" The video glitched, then screaming. A woman ran down the hallway, blood trailing from her mouth. Something was chasing her. Something tall, masked, silent. Then, black screen. Grace laughed nervously. "Dude, was that part of your film?" I shook my head slowly. No. That night, I couldn't sleep. The cabin creaked with every gust of wind. I heard Grace breathing in the other room. Then, something else. Laughter. Faint. Like someone giggling outside the window. I grabbed my camera, turned on night vision, and crept to the living room. Nothing. The window was closed, but the curtains were drawn, and I never drew them. I didn't sleep. The next day, we began shooting. Grace refused to stick to the script. She improvised, making a joke out of every line. I snapped. "This isn't a joke to me, Grace," she frowned. "It's just a dumb horror film, Emily. Chill." She didn't get it. She never did. This project wasn't just a film. It was therapy. It was an exorcism. I needed this to matter. That night, I reviewed the footage we shot and found extra footage. I hadn't filmed. The camera had been on, recording us sleeping. Someone else had used it. Grace wanted to leave, but we had no signal and the car battery was dead. She accused me of draining it on purpose. I didn't answer. I was staring out the window, where someone stood, just inside the tree line. Tall, wearing a mask, still, watching. I grabbed the camera. When I looked through the lens, he was gone, but the red light on the second camera was blinking. Someone had recorded us again. We found a second tape on the porch the next morning. No case, just the words, Project 2, scrawled in red. I wanted to throw it in the fire. Grace wanted to watch. We watched. Same cabin, different victim. This time a man tied to a chair, pleading. The camera never moved. The screaming never stopped. "Is this real?" Grace whispered. The man on screen looked directly at the lens, sobbing. "Please stop filming." Then, a masked figure stepped in, raised a knife. The camera cut to black. something snapped in me. I began documenting everything, every creak, every whisper, every shadow. Grace begged me to stop, said we should leave. I told her we couldn't. Not until I knew what was happening. The project had changed. I wasn't filming a horror story anymore. I was living one. That night, I woke to find the front door open. Cold air drifted in. Outside on the porch stood a tripod. My tripod. But I hadn't placed it there, and it was recording us. As I walked toward it, heart pounding, I saw something far in the woods. Flickering light. Another camera. Another tape. And behind it, movement. Something watching. I stood at the edge of the porch, camera in hand, breath sharp in my chest. That flickering light out in the woods. It wasn't a fire. It was another camera. A blinking red LED in the dark. Watching me. I stepped off the porch. Emily? Grace's voice was sleepy, confused. Where are you going? But I was already walking toward the light. Branches clawed at my arms as I moved through the trees. Then I saw it. A second tripod, deep in the woods, with a fresh tape sitting in the dirt beneath it. No footprints, no sound, only me, and the wind whispering my name. We watched the tape as the sky turned gray. This one began with me. Footage of me sleeping. Then brushing my hair. Filming Grace. Eating cereal. Then more disturbing shots. The footage shifted to something I didn't remember. It was me. Walking outside, holding a knife, heading toward the shed. Only I hadn't done that. But there it was. On film. Grace was losing patience. Are you doing this? Is this your twisted idea of a film? Making me scared? Watching fake tapes? I shook my head. I swear, this isn't me. She didn't believe me. And when I checked the battery on the handheld camera that night, I saw it had recorded something on its own again. More midnight footage. Of me. Standing beside Grace's bed. Staring down at her. Knife in hand. We boarded the windows, nailed shut the doors, but the whispering didn't stop. And that night, while reviewing footage, I saw something that made my blood freeze. A figure, tall, masked, standing behind me in the reflection of the bathroom mirror. I spun around. No one, but the camera saw him. Grace refused to sleep in her room anymore. She said she heard laughing from the closet, and scratching inside the walls. When I went to check, there was nothing. But I knew what was happening. They weren't just tormenting us, they were rehearsing, blocking scenes, planning a climax for their film. While inspecting the basement, I noticed something odd. A wall that sounded hollow when tapped. I pried it open and found a hidden room. Behind the foundation. Inside, blood-stained sheets, chains, a rotted mattress, and tapes. Dozens of them, each labeled with names. Most were faded, some crossed out. The last two tapes were labeled Emily, Grace. We slept in shifts, or at least we tried. One night I saw Grace standing in the hallway, stiff, silent. Grace, I whispered. She turned her head, unnaturally slow. Her eyes wide. She raised her hand and pointed behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. When I turned back, Grace was gone. We watched one of the tapes from the hidden room. It showed a woman, terrified, tied to a chair. The same basement we were in now. The same blood-stained floor. The woman sobbed. Behind her, a masked figure adjusted the camera, walked into frame, and slowly removed his mask. It was Grace. Or someone who looked exactly like her. I stopped trusting her after that. Was she sleepwalking? Possessed? Or worse? In on it? Grace noticed me watching her, recording her. She snapped. "What do you think I am, Emily? A killer? One of them?" I said nothing. Because deep down, I didn't know anymore. That night, the house went black. All the power, gone. And in the darkness outside the cabin, dozens of small red lights began to flicker. Cameras, everywhere, all aimed at us, recording. Then, from the trees, figures emerged, masked, tall, silent, each holding a camera, each ready to film our final act. We didn't sleep that night. The house was surrounded. Red camera lights blinked from the forest like demon eyes. No one came inside. They just watched. It was worse than violence. It was anticipation, like they were waiting for something. A cue, a signal, a scene. In the morning, I found a stack of papers on the porch, wrapped in twine. Fresh ink, coffee-stained edges, blood on the corner. It was a screenplay. Title: The Carter Sisters, by the directors. I flipped to the first page. It described everything we'd been through. Word for word, scene by scene. Even our dialogue. But then I turned to the later pages and read how it ends. Grace's death. My survival. A bloody climax in the woods, beneath a homemade gallows. That night, we heard voices outside, reading lines. "I don't want to die out here." One of them screamed, a voice mimicking mine. Grace opened the front door and screamed. There, hanging from the porch beam, was a mannequin dressed like her. Bloodied, neck twisted, a sign around its neck. Act 1, complete. We tried to run. Made it 2 miles into the woods before we stumbled into a clearing. And there it was, a stage. A literal movie set, complete with rigged lighting, tripods, and a fake cabin, a copy of ours, and tied to the wooden set beams. Photos of us, sleeping, crying, bleeding. One photo showed Grace dead. Another showed me standing above her body, smiling with a bloody knife. Grace looked at me and whispered, "You're not telling me everything, are you?" The bond between us cracked wide open. Grace stopped trusting me completely. She slept, with a knife, locked herself in the bathroom. She said she could hear her name in the trees. One night I woke up to her screaming. She swore I was standing over her again, holding the knife. Only I wasn't. At least, I don't think I was. Found one of their cameras lying near the woodshed. I played back the footage. There I was, walking in circles, muttering. But when I listened closely, I heard another voice on the audio track. Low, raspy. It whispered, "You're playing your part, Emily. Just like we wrote." It happened fast. I was washing blood off my hands. Animal blood, I hoped. When I heard the front door slam. Grace was gone. No note, no scream. Just gone. I found one clue. The script, now updated. The last page read, Scene 23. The final girl finds the sister's corpse. Cue scream, cue chase, cue the director's cut. Ran through the forest, camera in hand. Tripwires snapped, lights exploded. Loudspeakers turned on. Screams played on a loop. Grace's voice over and over. "Help me! Help me!" Then, the figures appeared again. Masked. Camcorders rolling. One of them raised a boom mic like a weapon. They weren't trying to kill me yet. They were directing me. I tripped over something and landed face first into the dirt. When I turned over, I saw them. Bodies. Old victims. Decaying in the soil. Each with a camera duct taped to their heads. They had filmed their own deaths. I screamed so hard my vision went black. Then the sound of clapping filled the woods. Applause from the shadows. When I made it back to the cabin, I found a fresh page on the floor, typed, still warm from the printer. It read, Scene 24. Emily returns to the cabin alone. The set is dressed. Cue the scream. Cue the kill. Roll credits soon. Then I heard the floor creak behind me and saw the camera light blink on. I followed the creaking sound to the back of the cabin. There was a trap door under the rug, one we'd never noticed. No hinges, just nailed shut from the outside. I tore the nails loose with a hammer, heart slamming in my chest. The smell hit first, then the sound. Film reels spinning. I climbed down into the dark and stepped into hell. It was a bunker, old, rotting, cold. Shelves upon shelves of VHS tapes and film cans, each one labeled with names. The Winters Family, 1996. Campfire, Girls, 2002. Final Cut, James and Lena, 2015, and dozens more. At the center of the room was an ancient editing machine, its screen playing a loop of a teenage girl being stabbed repeatedly, her screams echoing off the stone walls. She was looking straight into the camera. Her eyes begged for help. But the voice behind the camera just whispered, "Beautiful. One more take." There were masks hung on the walls, hundreds of them, each one different. Animal faces, porcelain dolls, twisted metal grins. I noticed something horrifying. Some of the masks were made of actual human skin, stitched and painted. I backed away and found a wall of newspaper clippings. Every story was the same. Murder-suicide, lost hikers, missing siblings, no bodies found, no footage recovered. Every victim had been part of a film. I found a new tape marked Scene 25, Grace Carter, solo performance. My hands shook as I slid it into the player. Grace appeared on screen, tied to a chair, bruised, crying, surrounded by lights, fog, and masked figures holding cue cards. She screamed my name. Then one of the masked directors leaned in and whispered in her ear. She went still and whispered, "Tell Emily, I forgive her." The screen cut to black. I screamed and smashed the monitor, but a new message blinked onto the cracked screen. Scene 26. Emily breaks. Beautiful. Keep rolling. I turned. One of them was there. Mask of a grinning wolf, holding a boom mic, camera light on, recording me. But he wasn't attacking. He was speaking through a voice modulator. "You're our best performance yet. Raw. Unfiltered. Pain suits you." I threw a crowbar and shattered the lens. The figure staggered, but more emerged. At least 4, all with different masks, all silent, all rolling. I ran. I made it back to the cabin with a stolen script page from the bunker, and read it. The next scenes were impossible. It said I'd find out something about myself, something I'd buried. I didn't want to read more, but I couldn't stop. Then I remembered something. When we were kids, Grace and I had made our own movies. Fake horror films, costumes, ketchup blood. But one day we found an old abandoned camera in our parents' attic. We filmed something on it. Something we weren't supposed to. A man in a mask had shown up, and we thought it was a dream. But what if that man had never stopped watching? I looked in the mirror and asked, what if I'd been playing my part this whole time? What if I was always the final girl? Was I being filmed even now? Had I already killed Grace and just forgotten? The pages of the script started changing. Words rearranged themselves in real time. I watched my name become something else. Emily Carter. Emulated character. Suddenly, I saw a flash. And then, Grace walked through the front door. Bloodied, limping but alive, she pointed a knife at me. "You left me," she whispered. Before I could answer, one of the masked figures burst through the wall and tackled her, screaming, stabbing. I picked up a lamp and caved in the attacker's head. His mask shattered. Underneath was our childhood friend Jordan, long dead. Or so we thought. Grace explained everything, sobbing. Jordan had vanished after that summer we made our fake movies. But he had been found by the original masked directors and turned into one of them. Now they made real horror films, the kind no one survives. The kind that are passed around underground forums like cursed films. They needed one final story to become legends. They needed us. We tried to escape, made it into the woods. But the ground collapsed beneath us. We fell into a buried movie theater, underground. Rows of skeletons still strapped in seats. The screen flickered on. It showed us in real time, standing in that exact theater. Grace screamed, and then the credits started rolling, but the last line read, "To be continued," in the director's cut. We were trapped in an underground movie theater made of corpses. The walls were stitched skin. The projector ran on blood. Rows of skeletal audience members stared blankly at the screen. And the screen? It played us in real time inside that same theater. No escape. Every scream, every step, already edited into a film. The title card burned across the screen. The final cut, starring Emily and Grace Carter. A slow clap echoed. A man stepped forward onto the stage. His mask, half-burnt film reel, his voice warped like broken tape. "Welcome to the finale, Emily. All your life, you've been acting. Now it's time to become the character we wrote for you." He called himself the director. He had been behind every slasher tape we found, every missing person, each film a sacrifice. The director pulled out a script bound in skin. He told us, "The truth. Your parents sold you to us before you were born. A generational deal. Fame for fear. You two were always meant to be the stars." He handed me the script. The final scene read, "Emily kills Grace. Emily earns her name in the Hall of Screams." The story ends with applause. I dropped it and ran. Grace was gone again. We sprinted into a hall of mirrors, each one reflecting us differently. Dead, mutilated, grinning. Masked killers lunged from behind the glass, smashing through, dragging. Fake bodies. We got split up again. Screams echoed. Some mine, some hers, some pre-recorded. The floor dropped. I fell into a set designed like a suburban kitchen. Blood everywhere. Props were real organs. Cameras blinked. A voice over the Scene 39, the betrayal. Grace entered, holding a cleaver. "I'm not dying for their film," she whispered. "We're not playing their game anymore," I said. The lights shut off. Someone began laughing in the dark. Mechanical, not human. We found others. Victims who had survived earlier scenes. Some half dead. Some completely mad. One guy, Marcus, was strapped to a dolly, forced to hold a camera while his intestines were wrapped around the reels. He begged us to kill him. Grace did it, and didn't blink. I started to wonder, was I the last sane one here, or just slower to break? We reached the final set, a replica of our childhood home. Everything identical. Even the bloodstain from when Grace broke her nose as a kid. And there, on the couch, sat our mother, alive, watching. She turned to us and said, "This is my legacy, girls." Then she smiled and ripped off her face, a mask, revealing another masked director underneath. Our family had never been victims. We were raised by monsters, only one way out. The final scene. A stage, a knife, two sisters, one camera rolling. The script read, "Only one survives. Blood earns freedom. The other becomes legend." Grace and I looked at each other. She dropped the knife. "I'm done playing." I picked it up. They all watched from the dark, waiting. I stabbed the director instead, then another, and another. Blood sprayed the cameras. Grace joined in. We turned the knives on every masked freak we could find. Screams, lights, explosions as projectors caught fire. We lit the whole set ablaze. The screen played back our kills in real time. An uncut, raw massacre. A voice crackled over the speaker. Scene 47. Improvised ending. Approval. Pending. We found a tunnel behind the burning screen. It led upward. A ladder? An escape? We climbed, bleeding, panting. The hatch opened into another cabin. Different location. Same camera setup. Same props. A fresh script on the table. We were back at the beginning, and the script now read, "Sequel in production." We emerged from the trapdoor into what looked like a perfect replica of the original cabin. Same floor creaks, same dusty film gear, same deer skulls on the wall. But something was wrong. The air smelled sterile. We weren't in the woods anymore. Through the window, nothing. Just black, endless black. Like we were floating in space. Grace whispered, "I don't think we're on Earth anymore." TVs flickered on. Rows and rows of screens, each showing different people around the world. Some in bedrooms, some in parking garages, some screaming, some killing. A voice crackled in from all angles. "Welcome to Studio 6, where stories never end." They told us the truth. This wasn't just a cult. This was a network, a secret society that produced snuff films broadcast to elite bidders around the world, and we were their highest-rated season. We found a room labeled Casting. Hundreds of headshots lined the walls. Victims, survivors, killers, directors. One section read, "Future Roles," and our faces were there again. Different costumes, different scenarios, labeled. Emily as the butcher's bride, Grace as the reluctant reaper. They were planning sequels, trilogies, merchandising. We were franchised. Deep underground in a cathedral-like chamber, we saw it. The broadcast altar, where every death scene was ritually live-streamed to the elite subscribers. Cameras floated silently, filming. Masked directors chanted in a circle, surrounding a girl on an iron table. She begged for her life. Grace charged in, no hesitation. She cut them down. We freed the girl, but her eyes were gone. She whispered, "Even without eyes, I still see the cameras." We ran through a costume warehouse, dodging masked extras, makeup artists holding chainsaws, lighting rigs that dropped like traps. I started hallucinating again. Or maybe I wasn't. Every time I looked in a mirror, I saw myself masked, directing, smiling, enjoying the blood. Was I becoming one of them? Grace noticed too. She kept asking if I was okay. I lied. I wasn't okay. I was breaking. We found the master script vault, thousands of blood-soaked scripts dating back to 1923, the beginning of the network, and one marked Season 1, The Carter Sisters. But what chilled me most? A blank script labeled Audience Rewrite in Progress. Our story was being written as we lived it. They weren't filming us. They were controlling us. One final broadcast room. One final stage. A script forced into our hands. It read, "Final scene. Grace dies. Emily ascends. Fade to black. Applause." Grace threw it into the fire. The alarms blared. We were surrounded. A live audience began clapping behind glass. Real people, rich, suited, sipping wine as they watched us bleed. We realized this wasn't just a horror movie. This was a business. They made us an offer. Kill her, Emily. Take your place as the next director. You've got the instinct. You've proven yourself. I looked at Grace. She just said, "Whatever you do, don't become what they want." I walked toward her, lifted the knife, and stabbed. The camera. Glass shattered. Sparks flew. Behind the mirrors, the audience screamed as the studio began to collapse. We grabbed fuel tanks, set fire to everything. Every reel, every screen, every script. One by one, the masked freaks tried to stop us. Grace took a hammer. I took a chainsaw. No more victims. We destroyed the entire broadcast altar. The signal died. The feed went black. No more sequels. No more scripts. Just silence and smoke. We escaped. Walked through the woods for hours. Days, maybe. Finally stumbled onto a highway. A truck. Driver stopped. Took us to town. Police interviewed us. We told them everything. They nodded. Wrote it all down, then smiled, and said, "Perfect pitch. We'll greenlight the series tomorrow." We froze. Their eyes glitched, like cameras recording. Us again, we never escaped. The sun burned golden over the wide Alabama plains, as two little girls ran barefoot through the high grass behind the William farmhouse. The sound of their laughter danced with the wind, pure, innocent, eternal. Rachel Walker, the more serious of the two, stopped suddenly near the old oak tree, her pale hair whipped by the breeze. "Let's bury something," she said. Emily William tilted her head. "Like what?" "Our promise," Rachel said with a proud grin. She had seen it in a movie once, girls burying a memory, a pact, so they'd never forget each other. She pulled from her pocket a small silver locket. "I'll put this in. You have to put something too." Emily hesitated, then untied the red ribbon from her wrist. "This was my mom's," she whispered. Together, they dug a shallow hole at the base of the tree with their hands and buried the ribbon and the locket wrapped in an old handkerchief. They never spoke of it again, but the earth remembered. 15 years later, Rachel stood in the cold hospital hallway, gripping the edge of her cardigan as if it could shield her from what she'd just heard. "We did everything we could," the doctor said, his voice flat with habit. "I'm sorry." Her son, Eli, was gone. One moment, a healthy, laughing 6-year-old. The next, a seizure in his sleep. No warning, no signs. Rachel collapsed into the hallway chair, a sound escaping her throat that wasn't quite human. Her world cracked. Her body shook with grief. But somewhere in that darkness, something else awoke. Not sadness, but bitterness. Rage. Jealousy. Emily William couldn't stop smiling. Her husband Daniel had just been promoted. Their home, nestled at the edge of the same sleepy town they grew up in, was nearly finished. And there was something else. Something tiny. Secret. She was pregnant. Emily hadn't told Rachel yet. Not because she didn't want to, but because Rachel had changed. Since Eli's death, she'd become distant, cold, eyes vacant, like staring through fog. Emily wanted to help her. But every time they spoke, Rachel seemed to drift further away. The last time they met for coffee, Rachel said something strange. Something Emily couldn't forget. "Have you ever wondered," Rachel whispered, staring into her untouched drink, "why your life is perfect, and mine is nothing?" Emily had laughed nervously. "Rachel, don't say that." But the way Rachel had looked at her, dead-eyed, with a flicker of something old and burning beneath, had chilled her. The townsfolk spoke of Agatha Moore, only in hushed tones. She lived deep in the pine woods, in a cabin twisted with vines, her windows always dark. Some said she'd been a midwife long ago. Others said she spoke to things not of this world. Rachel walked the path to her one foggy evening, carrying nothing but Eli's sock and a lock of her own hair. She knocked once. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, Agatha stood by a fireplace that hadn't burned in years. She looked Rachel up and down, then spoke in a voice like rustling leaves. "You've already made the choice. I can feel it. You're not here for comfort." Rachel nodded slowly. "I want her to suffer. I want her life to fall apart." Agatha lit a candle and whispered something in a language Rachel didn't understand. "Then there must be a price," Agatha said. "Everything comes at a cost." "I've paid mine," Rachel said, tears rolling down her cheek. "My son was the cost." Agatha didn't smile. She simply opened a jar of dried herbs and ash. "Then we'll call upon what lies between shadows." That night, as Rachel poured the ashes into the earth, buried the sock and ribbon, and repeated the old words under her breath, she didn't know what she'd summoned, but something heard her back at the William house. A clock stopped ticking at exactly 3 a.m. The lights flickered. Emily awoke with a scream, her stomach tight with cramps. In the hallway, Daniel swore he saw a shadow crawl across the ceiling. The wind outside moaned like a dying thing, and under the old oak tree, the earth stirred. Emily found it 2 days later while cleaning the backyard. A dirty, decayed strip of red fabric tangled in the grass. She picked it up, confused. Wasn't this her ribbon? She stared at it for a long time before tossing it in the trash. That night, it appeared on her pillow. Clean, tied in a perfect bow. Emily's dreams were not hers anymore. She saw herself standing in a forest, surrounded by whispering, trees that bled sap like tears. In the middle stood a child, barefoot, with his back turned. "Eli?" she whispered. The boy didn't turn. When she moved closer, he slowly raised his head. His face covered in ash, eyes completely black. He opened his mouth, but instead of words, a low growl rumbled from within. Emily screamed and woke up, drenched in sweat, her fingers clutching the red ribbon she swore she threw away. Daniel William was a rational man. He didn't believe in curses or spirits or childhood legends. But even he had begun to notice the strange happenings in the house. The cold spots, the way mirrors fogged with handprints, the sound of scratching behind the walls, like something with claws. He found Emily in the nursery, staring at the crib, whispering to herself. "I don't know if it's real," she said without looking up, "but I feel like something is inside the house, watching us." Daniel tried to comfort her. "It's just stress. You haven't slept right since the pregnancy started." But she only shook her head. "It's not the pregnancy. Something wants us." The next morning, Daniel found scratches on the inside of the nursery door. Long, deep grooves, like something had tried to claw its way out. He stared at them, sickened. "Raccoon," he muttered, though he knew no animal could get into that room. When Emily saw the scratches, she paled and ran to the bathroom to vomit. On the mirror, written in steam, were the words, "It's not yours." Rachel visited Emily that afternoon, unannounced. She brought flowers, lilies, like the ones placed at Eli's funeral. "I thought I'd check on you," she said sweetly. Emily gave her a tired smile, though her gut twisted the moment Rachel stepped in. Her presence felt heavier now. The air grew thick around her. Rachel touched her belly gently. "How's the baby?" Emily pulled back slightly. "Growing." Rachel nodded, eyes gleaming. "That's good. You must feel very lucky." There was a pause. Then Rachel leaned in close and whispered, "You should cherish every heartbeat. You never know when it'll be the last." Emily didn't respond. But that night, she cried into Daniel's chest. "She scares me. Rachel isn't Rachel anymore." At 3:10 a.m., Emily heard a giggle outside the nursery. When she opened the door, she saw a boy standing in the hallway, pale, dirt-covered, eyes shining like wet coal. "Mommy?" he asked. She backed away, shaking her head. "Eli?" But the boy vanished before her eyes. Daniel heard nothing. The next day, Emily found a small, muddy footprint on the white rug. Emily sought answers. Out of desperation, she tracked down Agatha. Moore, the old woman everyone whispered about. Agatha took one look at Emily and her face went ashen. "You shouldn't be here. Please," Emily begged. "Something's wrong with my baby, with my house." Agatha motioned for her to sit. "There is something inside you," she said. "Not just the child. You're marked." Emily froze. "Marked?" Agatha nodded. "Someone gave your name to the ones that dwell in the between. A jinn now walks behind you, waiting for its time." Emily stared, horrified. "Why?" Agatha's voice was a whisper. "Because someone gave it a reason." In Rachel's home, a dark altar had begun to take shape. Candles, bones, symbols painted in blood. She sat in the center chanting, staring at Eli's picture. "I offer her joy in exchange for mine," she whispered. "I offer her child in return for my own." Outside, thunder cracked the sky open. Emily collapsed during dinner. Blood soaked her dress, not from a miscarriage, but from everywhere. Her nose, eyes, even her pores. Doctors found nothing. Ultrasound showed the baby perfectly healthy. "She should be dead," one nurse whispered, terrified. But Emily lived, and so did the thing inside her. One night, Daniel woke to whispers crawling through the vents. He followed the sound to the attic. There, carved into the walls, were dozens of names, most unreadable, except one. Emily William. As he stared, a voice hissed behind him. "She belongs to us now." The William house became a vortex of terror. Emily saw Eli's ghost more often, but now he was angry. He'd cry, then scream. His face would shift into something monstrous. Doors slammed on their own, appliances turned on and off. Daniel began, sleepwalking, waking up in the woods barefoot and bleeding, and above the old oak tree, the sky always seemed darker. Rachel sat across from Father Thomas, her hands wrapped tightly around a cup of tea, untouched and long cold. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she muttered, eyes hollow. Father Thomas narrowed his gaze. "What did you do, Rachel?" She hesitated. Then, "I made a pact." The priest leaned forward. "With who?" Rachel looked up, a tear slipping down her cheek. "Not who. What? I asked them to bring Eli back. I gave them a name. I didn't know she'd be pregnant. I didn't know it would take root." Father Thomas crossed himself slowly. "You've unleashed something unholy." Rachel shook her head. "It was already unholy. I just gave it an address." Emily dreamed of walking into a mirror. On the other side, the nursery was filled with water. Floating inside was her unborn child, still and silent. A dark figure stood nearby. It had no face, but it whispered with many voices. "You were chosen," it hissed. "Chosen for what?" she asked. The creature stepped forward. "Chosen to birth the bridge." She woke screaming, and this time Daniel believed her. Daniel brought Father Thomas to the house. The priest walked through silently, pausing near the nursery. He placed his palm on the door and whispered, It's strong here. Emily told him everything. The dreams, the shadows, the ghost of Eli, the bleeding. Father Thomas knelt and began to pray. As he did, a framed photo of Eli fell from the wall and shattered. The pieces formed a symbol Emily had seen in her dreams, a crude spiral of thorns. Father Thomas stood, visibly shaken. "You must leave this house." "But I can't," Emily whispered. "It's inside me." Desperate for clarity, Emily convinced Father Thomas and Agatha Moore to help her perform a séance. They lit candles, formed a circle, and called out, "To Eli." The air grew cold. A deep moan echoed from the walls. Then Eli appeared, but not the sweet boy they remembered. His face was wrong, twisted, full of sorrow and rage. "Why did you let her take me?" he asked Emily. Tears streamed down her face. "I didn't know. I swear." Eli pointed at her stomach. "She promised them you." The candles exploded. The séance ended in screaming. Daniel searched Rachel's house when she was away. In a locked drawer, he found her journal. It described the pact in detail, the ritual, the offerings, the names. Emily's was at the top. Further entries showed something worse. Rachel was preparing to make another offering, another name, Daniel William. Daniel stormed to Rachel's house that night. "You tried to sacrifice my wife and child," he yelled. Rachel didn't deny it. "They weren't supposed to be hurt. I only wanted mine back." "You gave up your soul." She nodded, unblinking. "And I got my son. You have no idea what it's like to bury your child." Daniel pointed at her. "You brought back something else. That thing in our house isn't Eli. It never was." Rachel's lips curled into a small smile. "That's where you're wrong." Emily received a visit, not from a human, but from the entity itself. It took the form of her mother, long dead. "You don't have to suffer," it said. "Let us in, fully. We will give you peace." She trembled. "What happens if I refuse?" It tilted its head. "Then the child dies. Slowly." Emily fell to her knees. "Please, don't hurt him." The entity smiled. "Then make the pact." Emily noticed a second birthmark forming on her belly. A mirror image of the first, spiraled like the symbol from the séance. Agatha came to examine her. She touched the mark and gasped. "This is no child inside you. It's a gate." Emily sobbed. "What do I do?" Agatha leaned in. "You don't give birth to it. You bury it." Daniel began planning their escape. "We leave tonight," he told Emily. "We'll go somewhere safe, far from here. We'll find someone to help." But when they tried to leave, the car wouldn't start. Their phones were dead, and every window in the house had turned black, like tar had been smeared across the glass. They were trapped. That night, Rachel entered the William home without knocking. She wore a red cloak, barefoot, and held a dagger made of bone. "You have something that doesn't belong to you," she hissed at Emily. Daniel tried to stop her, but something invisible hurled him across the room. Rachel raised the dagger toward Emily's belly. And then, Eli's ghost appeared. His scream shattered every bulb in the house. Rachel collapsed, clutching her ears. Blood ran from her eyes. The entity returned to Rachel. "You failed," it whispered. "I gave you what you asked," she cried. "You gave us a shell. Now we take the source." Rachel was lifted into the air. She screamed, once. Then silence. Her body hit the floor with a dull thud. Emily and Daniel tried every door, every window. All were sealed shut. as though the house had sunk into a different realm entirely. Agatha Moore arrived in secret, slipping past the barriers through a hidden crawl space she'd known as a child. The William house was built on land once used for rituals long before the town existed. She brought holy salt, ash, and a thick leather book with no title. "It's not about escape anymore," she told them. "It's about containment." Emily sat with Rachel's journal once more, flipping to the back where pages had been torn and taped hastily. A drawing of the blood moon. Underneath it, one line was written repeatedly. "When the red sky burns, the child becomes the door." Emily clutched her belly. The birthmarks were burning now, pulsing with their own rhythm. Agatha revealed a final, terrifying truth. There was another child once, born under the same ritual. In 1901, the mother died screaming. The child was never seen. But they say the screams still echo inside this house. Emily's voice broke. "And what happened to the child?" Agatha's hands trembled. "He became the gate, and the town paid the price." That's when they all heard it. A baby's cry echoing through the air vents, though Emily hadn't given birth. Eli's ghost returned again. But this time he spoke to Daniel alone. "You should have left her, Daniel." Emily, Eli, nodded. "She's marked. She's the last piece. When the blood moon comes, they will take her. And then all of you." Daniel gritted his teeth. "Then tell me how to stop it." Eli shook his head. "You can't stop it. But you can trap it." That night, the sky outside turned red. Not the glow of dusk, but crimson like freshly spilled blood. Every electronic device sparked and died. Lights exploded, water ran black, and Emily began screaming in labor. It was too early, but something inside her was ready. Emily fell into a fevered trance. Her eyes rolled back, whispering in a voice that wasn't hers. Agatha and Daniel laid her down and began the ritual from the old book, reversing Rachel's original pact. But it was too late. The creature inside her wasn't human. Emily screamed, and the birthmark split open like an eye, blinking. Something crawled beneath her skin, pushing outward. Father Thomas returned, bloodied and injured but alive. He brought with him an ancient relic. A stone embedded with a blackened nail said, "To pierce demons, there's only one way to stop the birth," he said, gasping. "A soul for a soul." Daniel looked at Emily. "No, there has to be another way." But Emily nodded. "It's me or the world, isn't it?" She placed her hand on her stomach. "Let me say goodbye first." Emily whispered into her belly, "You're not my son, but if there's anything left of him inside you, forgive me." She kissed Daniel. "Promise me, if we stop this, you'll burn this house, salt the ground, never let anyone live here again." Daniel choked on his words. "I promise." Emily lay in the circle Agatha drew, surrounded by ash and fire. The relic glowed in Father Thomas's hand. Daniel turned his back. He couldn't watch, and with a final chant, a scream tore through the room. A sound that wasn't human, wasn't earthly. A thing being ripped out of time. Then silence. Emily was gone. The house went quiet. The lights returned to normal. No wind. No crying. No whispers. The red moon faded into white, and Daniel dropped to his knees beside the ashes. Agatha wept in silence. Father Thomas whispered a prayer. The nightmare was over. Or so they thought. Daniel stood before a small grave. A simple stone read, "Emily William Brave, beloved, broken." He kept his promise. The William house was burned to the ground, the land salted, the property sealed off. He tried to move on, but the nightmares never stopped. Neither did the scratches on the walls of his new apartment. Despite living on the 6th floor, Agatha, now living in a church shelter, had started having visions again. But this time, it wasn't Emily she saw. It was a boy, pale, with empty eyes and a stitched mouth, standing in the woods where the William house once stood. She rushed to Daniel. It's back, and it's growing stronger. Daniel's heart sank. I buried her. I saw her die. Agatha shook her head. You didn't bury the child. You buried the vessel. Daniel investigated the burned ruins of the William house. Among the rubble, beneath melted floorboards, he found something impossible. A single perfectly preserved cradle. Inside it, a child's cloth doll, its eyes ripped out, its mouth stitched shut. As he touched it, his nose began to bleed. He dropped it. And from the shadows, a child's voice whispered, "Daddy." Agatha introduced Daniel to Mary, a 6-year-old girl who had been adopted by a couple in another town. Her parents recently died in a house fire. Now, Mary drew disturbing images with crayons, a woman burning, a red moon, and a faceless boy always watching her. Daniel felt cold when he met her. She turned to him and asked, "Why did you leave me in the fire?" He backed away. "You're not her." Mary's eyes rolled back. "You made a promise. You failed." At night, Daniel's dreams bled into waking life. Emily standing at the foot of his bed, weeping black tears, doors slamming, mirrors cracking as he passed. Bloody handprints on the ceiling. Agatha warned him. The entity didn't die. It escaped. It's looking for a new gate. And Mary was almost ready. Agatha led Daniel to a reclusive woman named Helena, the last surviving member of the original coven that tried to bind the demon in 1901. Helena was half-blind, burned, and missing fingers, punishment for betrayal. She said, "There's only one way to stop it. You must return to the original altar and sacrifice what started it all." Daniel. "You mean the book?" Helena. "No, the bloodline." Daniel went pale. "Emily's bloodline?" Helena nodded. "Mary. Daniel couldn't do it. He wouldn't hurt Mary. She was just a child, even if something else was inside her." But then Mary stood at the doorway and said in a voice not her own, "Don't be weak again, Daniel. You know how this ends." Agatha, Helena, and Daniel made a new plan. Use the altar site to bind the entity one last time. Lure it using Mary's body. Trap it within the ancient relic Thomas once carried. But they needed one more thing. A willing host for the final sacrifice. Daniel said nothing, but he knew who it had to be. Daniel. Agatha, Mary, and the frail Helena stood in the cursed forest, where the first ritual was ever performed. The altar was cracked stone, stained with something darker than time. Wind howled though the trees stood still. The sky turned gray. Daniel lit the circle with sacred oil. Agatha began the chant. Mary sat at the center, humming a lullaby no one had ever taught her. As the ritual began, the ground shook. From the shadows, laughter, like a child, echoing through empty space. Mary's body froze, then she stood slowly, looking at Daniel. "Will you give me what I want now?" Daniel held the relic in one hand. "Not her. Take me." The demon's voice hissed. "A man's soul, weak, but yours is ripe with regret." A sudden gust extinguished. The flames, Agatha clutched her chest and collapsed. Smoke poured from her mouth, not fire, but shadows. She whispered, "Finish it, before it's too late." Then she was gone. Her body vanishing in a burst of ash, as though she'd never existed. Mary screamed, not in fear, but in rage. "She was mine!" Daniel raised the relic, now glowing red. The demon rose through Mary's body, distorting her voice, cracking the air around her, making her eyes glow like hot coals. But Daniel didn't run. He stepped into the altar. "I'm done running. You want pain? Take mine." He shoved the relic into his own chest. Light exploded from the altar. The forest screamed. Mary fell backward, unconscious. The entity twisted, screeching through every tree, every rock, every shadow. Helena wept. "He's doing it. He's becoming the gate." And just like that, silence. Daniel was gone, but so was the demon. The circle burned white hot, then dimmed. Only ashes remained where Daniel stood. Mary opened her eyes. They were clear. Her voice was her own again. "Where's Daniel?" "Helena. He's at peace. He saved you." Mary cried softly. For the first time, she felt human. Helena led her away from the altar. "Let's go home, child." 10 years later, a new family moves into a house built near the ruins. Their daughter finds something in the backyard. A doll, burned, eyeless, mouth stitched shut. She smiles and takes it inside. A whisper fills the wind. "I never left."